we're going to look at another one of the nodes in a bit more detail. So what I've got here is I've just got a very simple scene. I've got Suzanne and a sphere, and I have added a HDR background, which we can see there. Okay, and I've just made it transparent on the film, so it's easy to see what's going on. And this is in render view. Okay, we've looked at a few of the textures. We've looked at the brick. We've looked at well, we know the environment texture covers like the background environment, HDRIs, stuff like that. Image texture we've used as an input texture, and we also use an image texture to bake onto. We've looked at Voronoi, where we made the leather. We've looked at the wave, where we made the wood. I think today we'll have a little play around with the noise texture and see what that does. Okay, so I've got a very simple material setup with just a diffuse and an output set to both of these objects. Okay, so if I plug in the noise texture into the diffuse so we can see what it's doing, we've got this kind of multicolored. The only way to describe it is noise, because that's exactly what it is. It's kind of like random patches of noise, of colors, of values, which gives us this rather kind of rainbow, kind of like an oil bloom effect on water. Okay, so what can we do with this? Well, first of all, let's look at our settings here. Let's come in closer. Let me find somewhere a bit easier to see. Okay. First of all, we've got scale. Now, the scale will affect the size of these color patches. So default is 5. If I ramp that up to 50, 10 times, you see how much smaller everything is, how much more condensed. Similarly, if I come down to 0, we get nothing. But if I come to 1, we should get something quite large. Okay, so I'd say 0 actually isn't nothing. It's just so big we're not seeing any variance. We're just seeing that one kind of color kind of thing. So let's put that back to, let's put it to 10. Okay, so we've got a good variance to see here. Detail is the next one. And detail really affects the transition from one color to the other, how sharp the transition is. So detail is at 2. If I put that up to 20, it probably might be hard to see, but the transition between, let's say, this kind of yellow and this pink should be sharper. If I put that back to 2, maybe we'll be able to see it. That's a little bit softer. Let's try that at 200. Try and make something really distinctive. Hard to see, but anyway, that's what detail is. And distortion will act a bit like the wave. It's going to kind of pull and push all these colors in different directions. So let's put distortion up to 10. And you can see it a lot clearer here, how it's distorting and kind of swirling and mixing everything. If I put distortion up to 100, where would we be? Hard to see, I would imagine, but if we zoom in just a little, you should be able to see where that distortion is a lot greater. So distortion back to 0. Okay, so what can we do with this apart from this kind of bloomy pearlescent type of thing? Well, we could, I suppose, let's add a mapping setup to this. Okay, and we could play with the scales on the X and the Y and the Z, I suppose. So let's go scale of 50 on the X, and we're now getting this kind of long linear pattern. Obviously if I was to do that on the Y as well, it would probably come back to a bit more. This is acting a bit like the scale on the texture itself, which is reasonable. I thought I'd put that at 50, I didn't. Okay. Why isn't that accepting the 50? 50, enter. Huh. How strange. Oh, it is. It's just this doesn't seem to be wide enough to display it. Okay. Right. Similarly, we could use rotation to rotate things around. Let's put this at 1 and this back to... Well, actually, let's leave it at that for the moment. Just so we've got a bigger variance here to see. We could rotate on the Z-axis, say. That doesn't seem to be doing a great deal. Here it all looks the same. That's probably the way this is mapped. So I'm looking at this kind of delta area here. It's changing colours a little bit, but the actual mapping isn't. Okay, if I change this from generated to object and try this, no, pretty much the same. Alright, so anyway, let's get rid of these two nodes. Okay, so we've got our noise texture there, and what else can we do with this? Well, as in the Voronoi and the wave texture, and also the brick texture, we were able to use it as a displacement. Okay, so let's plug that into displacement and see what happens. Now we're getting this very kind of like worn rock type of texture here. Okay. This kind of displacement, and once again we could control this with a math node, with a multiply node. So shift A, converter, math. Let's change this to multiply. So there we got a slider that we can use with values between 0 and 1. So 0 should give us no displacement, and 1 should give us this full kind of displacement. Okay, so we're getting this kind of worn rock. So this would be good for maybe garden fixtures or concrete walls or stones in a castle, something like that, where you're getting that worn kind of rock and this random surface texture. Okay, if we want to do something a bit different with this, let's add in a color ramp. So there's our color ramp before, where we can control the black and white values. Okay, so if I slide this value up a bit and I slide this value down a bit, so we're kind of narrowing that band. Let's, for the minute, bypass the multiply. Okay, let's bring this in a bit closer. We're now getting this kind of very pop-marked kind of effect. This might be a little easier to see if we add a gloss. So let's do that real quick. Shift A and a gloss shader, and let's add a mix shader into that. Okay, so we're getting this kind of metallic, almost alien type of metal compound type thing. And of course we can play with scale and detail again. So let's bring this scale up to about 50. Wow. Detail up to about 20. Okay. So what we can see here is the noise is affecting inside these craters, shall we say, and we've still got the smooth surface. Okay. If I was to invert this, okay, let's zoom in on a small area. Come on, I've lost it. There we go. Let's go to the right, so we can't clip. Alright. So you can see how we're getting this noise in the craters and we're getting a smooth kind of glossy surface. Okay. So if I was to invert this, we are seeing a difference. But it's hard to describe the relationship between that difference. However, what happens if I actually add an invert node? Wherever that is, color, invert node after. So we're going to see the same thing. So factor of 0, factor of 1. No, that's not actually making any difference, is it? Alright. Well, we can bring this displacement back in. Once again, we could bring the multiply back in. So we have a control over the value of it. So there's 0. .15. We're getting a much more subtle kind of effect. Even that might be a bit much. Let's go 0.05 and let us increase the scale, make this bigger rather than smaller. So to increase it, we have to decrease this. So let's bring this back down to about 20. Okay, and that's looking kind of good on Suzanne actually. Where we're getting this kind of it's almost like a concrete surface texture, where we're getting these pock marks and these weather marks and this kind of flaking on the surface. Okay, so what would happen if I added something like a Voronoi into the diffuser? Now we're getting this much more kind of like a metallic kind of thing. We can see these black and white cells, so let's increase that to 50 is too much. Even 20 is too much. Let's do this with cells. And let us desaturate this. So shift A, color, hue saturation, and let's turn the saturation down. So we're just getting it black and white. It's almost like the name escapes me, the metal coating, galvanized coating. Let's get rid of that. Okay, so using the noise as a displacement, we can also play around with these values here. in the color ramp to get a kind of a softer look. Let's come in a bit closer here. So we're not getting, by moving these values towards the right, we're not getting as many depressions in the middle, and that would look good with a kind of a concrete, I think. Let me quickly just try and find a concrete texture. Okay, I found one, so let me just drag it in here. And if we go to the image, what did I do? I lost it there somewhere. I lost everything there. There we go. Somehow I added a cube there. Let's get rid of that cube. That's why I lost it. Alright. So let's go to image editor here. And if we open up that concrete, we're able to see this concrete texture that I'm using. Alright. So back to nodes. And let's come back here to a rendered view. And now if we add this concrete into the diffuse, and we turn that glossy down quite a bit. Let's say about there. Not getting a lot of that concrete texture coming through, am I? Let's put that straight onto the surface. And this is set to UV, so let's set that to generated. That's probably why. Yep. Rather than generated, let's try object, because we're getting these long streaks on the generated. Normal. That's looking a bit better. Right. So getting this concrete texture, and let's see how that renders out. We're getting some surface imperfections from the noise texture here. Okay, put that back into the factor and not into the factor, into the mix. Come on. Okay. Let's go full screen on this. And let this render out. You can see where we're getting this rather nice kind of like stone concrete with some little imperfections there. Let me try and add a bit more to the surface here. So we had that at 0.05. Let's change that to about 0.25. Go full screen again. There. And that's kind of more what I was looking at, or more what I was looking. Get rid of that. More what I was looking for. This, oh, for God's sake. Come on. There we go. More what I was looking for was this kind of like weathered stone concrete. This would look fantastic on some kind of garden ornaments, statues, outdoor masonry type of things. And this was achieved with noise texture. Okay, let's stop there.